So over the weekend, someone actually asked me an interesting question. I thought, hey, this would be a good topic for Real Talk. Mm-hmm. And they asked me the question, how do you begin a project? Someone comes to you, they ask you, hi, I would like to make a video. How do you begin? Where do you even start?
Yeah.
Like, this is like, and they were posing the question, like, pre-contract. Like, they were just like,
where do you go?
I didn't even know a contract was a thing. Where do you begin with this?
Okay.
How do you start?
So I think that's a good question to be asked, because it's hard to, once you're, as far along as we are, like, not just in the business, but we did a lot of stuff freelance, and we had been doing videos for a very long time.
Yeah.
It's kind of hard to remember that we were at that point ever. Of
yeah.
like,
I'm thinking back on it, we kind of remember that point.
I do, but it in the day to day, I don't. Yeah, in the day to day, I don't typically just sit there and remember, like, think about like that moment of when I was
right.
Like, where do I begin? Because then you're right. I have gotten that question too, and I think it's a good thing to remember, because when you get asked that question, it's hard to answer. But
sometimes it is. Yeah, it was kind of hard when they asked me, but yeah.
So,
I mean, it was hard and it wasn't, because like, so my mind goes everywhere.
Yeah.
Like, knowing where I am now.
Right.
Because being a little bit more mature in the industry than when we started, obviously, your mind goes to different places. Mine's like, well, you begin with sales.
Oh.
But you never, I mean,
So you're even talking about in the
well,
context
no,
of starting
I'm
a business.
not, because that's where my mind goes. Well,
Okay.
you begin with sales.
You begin with
have
sales.
to find who even wants your services.
Right.
You don't want to tell some young kid who wants to start up a business like this that you're going to be a salesperson.
Yeah,
you
right.
don't want to tell them that. They're like,
oh,
I want to be a filmmaker. So,
it depends on what they want to be too, as to what the answer is.
So for me, it's like you gotta actually listen to the question.
Yeah.
And know, like, what are they asking? They didn't ask me, how do I find projects?
Right.
They asked, where do I begin with a project?
Begin?
Let's assume that the client has already approached us and said, hey, I want to create a video.
Sure.
And we're like, great. So let's take it from that point. At the beginning, when we were younger, there was actually no real clear, like, what do we do? We had no idea. What we knew we had to do is figure out, what do they want?
Yeah.
First and foremost. What does our client want? But we had no magic rule book.
There is none.
Well, maybe there is, but we definitely were not handed it.
Yeah.
So we kind of had to make that rule book up. And, what we did is we sat down, and we still do this to this day, where we're still revisiting this list and refining it, but we created a list of questions to extract from our customers. What are you hoping to get?
Yeah, like these are the baseline questions that will at least give us some info.
It'll give us enough info to let our creative minds take over.
Right, because sometimes those questions, the answer they give us isn't even related to necessarily that specific project.
Yeah.
It's like you got to use all of this info,
Well, and I would say that's the more mature take that we take on it now. Like,
Sure.
there are questions we ask in meetings where clients are like, why are you asking us this? And we're like, because, thinking long term, this will get us to this objective if we focus on these topics.
Yeah, and sometimes they even give their answer like, was that even what you were looking for? And you're like, absolutely.
That was perfect.
And you're like, I told you about my favorite ice cream. And you're like, great. I can use that.
I mean, but that's more mature. But like when we were younger, we were like, well, how long do you want your video to be?
Yeah.
Where is this going to be viewed?
Who would you like to be featured?
Who would you like to be in it? Yeah. But that's fine. That's a really great
Those are good questions,
You need to know who, what, when, where, and why.
Yeah.
Ask those 5
elementary
questions.
school teachings.
Ask them however you want to ask them in whatever type of questions you have.
Yep.
If you can ask those 5 questions and walk away from your first meeting with your client with those answered, you're going to be in a really good spot, because then, from our experience, we see it as we've gotten the logistical and, I guess, strategic thought process out of the way to now allow our creative minds to take over.
Yep.
And one of the most important things that we've learned, and this is something we did not do at the beginning, our knee-jerk reaction was to always jump into the creative first.
Yeah, it was, and that got us into some sticky situations.
Not even
sometimes.
sticky situation. Sometimes the video you watch at the end and you're just like,
Okay.
I guess.
Yeah.
I guess that worked.
Yeah.
And we have found over the years it's better.
Well, it puts you in a box is more what I feel like. When you start with the creative, like there isn't
Oh,
any
sure.
room for getting out of that.
Yeah, sometimes.
And
Yeah.
saying this is the better approach, actually.
Well, and sometimes we'll find out, we'll be on set and we'll be like, why is he saying this? Or why
Yeah,
is the person
yeah.
on screen saying this?
Yeah.
We're like, this doesn't make any sense. So what we've learned over the years is write the script first. Not the script as far as like interior house.
Right.
Day. It's a winter setting.
Yeah.
And the fireplace is roaring. And he's drinking coffee.
Yeah.
And he's reading his favorite novel. It's not that. It's more, what do you, the client, need to say? I need to sell my beverage
Yep.
to an audience who is 25 to 40 years old,
Yep.
predominantly male, and the time that we're shooting for, the time of year that this advertisement is running, is in winter.
Right.
Now,
Wolf Cola.
Wolf Cola. So that's what you need to extract first. And then if at all possible, convert that into a linear story.
Yeah.
So if you have dialogue, if you know your character has dialogue, everyone asks,
Or there's if there's
do
a
you start with the
narration.
action and the scene description first or the dialogue first? For me, for us, most of the time it comes down to dialogue. There are some situations where we have had clients come to us and say, I want it in this setting, but we have always found, most of the time when they say they want this setting,
Right.
we have found that doesn't always translate.
Well, and it's interesting.
Because you push back and you say, why?
Well,
And they
and
say, I don't know.
That's interesting because, and I actually think we could do another one someday of like how do you start a narrative piece, because they're totally different.
Sure.
Because I would say, yeah, absolutely, you're right. Like if we have narration or text prompts or a dialogue or anything, we always, or even interview, we always start with that first.
Right.
And because then we need the B-roll and the video to match, and that's the easiest way to do it.
To visually plus up.
Right. Whereas in a narrative, it's the other way around.
Sometimes, yeah, right.
Um,
Although
I'll-
sometimes we've written short
Sure.
stories
Based on
on
dialogue.
one line of dialogue.
Yeah, but that's right. But even that's more like the spark. But then once you actually start beating it out and you writing it and
Right,
stuff,
right.
It's usually the other way around.
It's usually the scenarios and the places, and then the dialogue takes
So
over.
for this one, let's stick on corporate.
But let's just talk about
yeah.
project in general, because I mean, yeah, right. And I think for me that's really important that you script out the goals and objectives, how the audience should hear them.
Yeah.
Because ultimately that's what a commercial is meant to do. It's
Yeah.
meant to sell something, and it's meant to present it in a way that the audience is going to connect with it.
Yep.
And you can't do that without strong narrative.
Yeah.
And that might be text on screen. It might be a person
Right.
actually on screen or voiceover.
Right.
That might happen. But that comes later, figuring that out later, right? What's right for your platform that you're showing it on, all these types of things. Those things can get decided.
Yep.
But what's actually being said is really important, because then we can look
Right.
at that and say, okay, what makes sense visually? So you have these 5 questions: who, what, when, where, and why.
Yeah.
They're important because us, video producers, creative directors, we don't understand everything in the universe. Believe it or not.
What?
And I think one of the things that makes us experts at what we do is our ability to listen
Yep.
and to translate and transform ideas that are nebulous that a client has in their mind, translate and transform that into a tangible idea that's visually representative of the story they want to tell.
And interesting.
Right. Well, yeah. Yes. Well, and you know, the interesting part, that is a big one, because at the start, it is our job to make it we at least feel like we have to figure out how to make this interesting.
Right.
And we have found ourselves a lot of times sitting there being like, how do we make this interesting?
Right. Well, and I think there's a fine line between trying to be too clever and you totally miss the mark because you're just trying to be interesting for
Right.
that sake.
Right.
And then there's the where you just played it too safe and really all you did was meet the goal.
Yeah.
And then creatively,
A lot
you
of
didn't do
times you
anything.
find yourself in a balancing match of talent, techniques, and tools. Is what I would call it.
The three T's.
Oh, I don't know. Sure, we're writing a new book. So the tools would be anything: a drone, a camera, a gimbal,
Sure.
whatever. Right? Those are your tools.
Yep.
Those come into the creative process because you need those tools to do a certain technique.
Right.
Techniques are gimmicky at times. Other times they're not. A technique, dolly zoom. That's a very good one. Like,
Yeah.
Whoa, we want them to feel like out of body experience. It's a dolly zoom, totally. Okay, that's a technique.
Yeah.
Or using a split diopter, or using using a super deep depth of field because you want it to feel more video-esque, or
Right.
you really want to portray. All these things, those are techniques, and
Right.
those dictate the tools you need to do it.
Right. But I would say those don't come into play until you've nailed down the start.
And I would say that's where the talent comes in.
Right.
Right. Your expertise, your talent as a storyteller has to come into play first.
Yeah.
You have to say, my client wants this to be told.
Yeah.
We don't know what this is. It's this big old X. But they want X to be told. Now, how am I going to translate that? Now, once I have that, I can start focusing about techniques, and then I can start focusing about tools.
Yeah.
Because those are all stepping stones, and that's the thing about filmmaking and visual storytelling in general is it's all very much a step-by-step process. Step one,
Right.
do this. Step two, do this. Step
Yeah.
three, do this, and continue.
And I think that's important because of kind of what I said earlier of like, don't start with the creative.
Right.
Don't start with the technique.
Don't start
because
with the gimmick,
you
right.
put yourself in a box so quickly. So if you're starting with that, a really cool jib shot goes from a really cool jib shot to a really gimmicky out of place shot real fast.
And expensive.
And expensive, and it's not needed. And we have only learned this because we have dealt with this.
Absolutely.
Where we have totally based an entire piece or something on the idea that there needs to be a jib shot. I'm just picking on the jib today.
We love the jib.
Or there needs to be a drone shot, and then we get into the piece and it just doesn't fit, and you keep trying to mash this puzzle piece from a different puzzle into the puzzle you have. And you're like, why doesn't it go?
Right. This was so great.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
need this.
And then,
we've had one success where it all was based on a gimmick or a technique.
which one was that?
The Shul coffee piece. Like, that
Oh, okay.
originated from a technique. How do you
Did it?
shoot? Yeah, I mean, how do you shoot artisan coffee?
No, I would still say that originated from an idea.
Yeah, but
Because you weren't like, how do you use a slider in an artisan?
I kind of was. Nah, you're right. You're right. I was more.
Give yourself a little more credit.
All right, it did originate from the talent side. I would say, like, of saying, I want to do this in
Right.
a way that makes pour over coffee look kind of sexy
Right.
and promote a product.
And it was, so I would say that was a really clear indicator of the right starting point.
And then I put my tools into place. To make
Right,
it happen.
because that piece happened super fast and it came out exactly the way that you expressed it. I mean, I think ultimately what I have kind of extracted from this conversation we're having is the number one place to start is listening.
Absolutely.
Not necessarily even, because I think this goes all across the board. We're talking more about corporate. So listen to your client. Listen to what they want.
Right.
Listen to what they need.
Right.
And listen to where they want it, who they want to see it.
And I think that's easier said than done.
Totally.
And I think we have worked very hard to put our ideas on the back shelf.
Yeah.
And always put our clients' ideas up front.
Well, and just listen.
And by listening, that's
Yeah.
how we do it, is by listening.
Yeah.
Because there have been so many times where we're in a creative session trying to extract a story and a narrative direction for a project.
Right.
Based on what our client has told us, and you'll have an idea or I'll have an idea.
Right.
Sometimes we'll talk about it for a half an hour, 45 minutes, and then we'll get to a certain point where we're like, that is so far off base.
Right.
And we have to throw that idea in the trash because it just ultimately doesn't get us to that end goal
Yep.
for our customers'
Yep.
needs.
Yep.
And listening is very important. I would even say when it comes to your own narrative project,
listening.
You got to listen. Now, how do you listen? Well, you got to put yourself out there. You
Right.
got to ask someone for advice. But if you ask
Right.
someone for advice,
Listen
to their advice.
Yeah.
You don't necessarily have to take what they're saying and do 100% what they're saying, but
Right.
at least listen to and identify that their concern that they are rising up or bringing to you in some capacity is valid.
Yeah.
Because it stuck out to them. Now, maybe test it. Maybe they're the only one that had a problem with that section.
Sure.
Maybe bring that up. Show some other people. Well, did you have a problem with this section?
Right.
And they say, no, I thought that was
Yeah.
great. Okay, cool. That one person's idea can be invalidated.
Right.
That's not a problem.
Right.
You don't have to listen to them, but don't intentionally ignore their comment right away.
But even just going back to like starting the project,
Right.
like listening to like it's the same thing with a client process. It's like figure out what do I want to tell, why am I telling it, what's in it, and who's gonna watch it.
Right.
Listen to that. Like, don't fill it up with techniques just because I have the thing, so I want to
Right.
show.
Well, and the things are expensive.
The things are expensive.
People ask me sometimes, how do you shoot something that's not super expensive? Well, set yourself up with non-expensive equipment.
Right.
And then be happy knowing that you don't have every piece
Right,
of tool
right.
and equipment under the sun at your disposal.
Right.
Allow that to drive your creativity.
Right.
How can you show something in this way without that tool?
Well, I think that's why some of our early days and even in film school were beneficial, that there wasn't a lot available because we
Right.
did have to get
Right.
super creative with how we showed stuff.
And I'm not an advocate of guerrilla filmmaking in general, because I think your craft only gets better once you have those tools.
And I think even that can be a gimmick.
We've used them. We've worked alongside of the really top end equipment and
Right.
tools, and it is night and day.
Sure.
Having a Fisher dolly is night and
Versus
day
a wheelchair.
compared to a wheelchair.
Yeah. But I think the point is, and this is a different real talk too,
Right.
like I think not getting bogged down in the tools, but I think also being okay if you just have a wheelchair.
Be exhilarated. You just have
Right. Be exhilarated. You have anything.
Right. Yeah.
But
for
I
sure.
think ultimately, to kind of wrap all this up, I think the number one place to start, if anybody, and I'm glad we talked about this because now I have a little more clear answer on that. Like, if somebody's like, where do I start?
Yeah.
Listen.
Then put your creative mind to work to
Yes.
bring it new life.
Right.
It's
like
a two-step process.
Right. It's you are the creative. That is your job to take all this information you just consumed and turn it into something really cool and unique.
Mm-hmm. Everything you just said is spot on, but as you were saying that, I'm like, we're forgetting one key step.
Oh.
The beginning is not just two steps. It's 3 steps.
Oh.
It's listen. Step 2, put your creative mind to work to create
Yep.
the best representation. And then step 3, present it back to the person who needs it done.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
And make sure it is in line, because we see
Yeah.
that too often where creatives get an idea in their mind and this is what I'm doing.
yeah. And this is all it can be.
All it can be. And there's no room. Not
Right.
even the client who's writing the bill can change my mind.
Right.
Now you've run into
Now you've only listened just so that you can say what you needed to say.
and at the end of the day you're creating your project.
Right.
And that's not appropriate. It's not ethical. You
No.
need to be an asset and a resource to other people who
Right.
can't do what we do.
Because yes, you are creative, but you are also a service in that capacity. In the
Exactly.
corporate capacity.
Yeah, absolutely. And then also know that what you're creating is for them.
Right.
And at the end of the day, you will leave it with them. It will not be yours.
Right.
You may use it on your demo reel. You may use it to get you new work and say,
Right,
well, look what
right.
we did for this client or that client or blah, blah, blah. But it's not yours. You don't own it.
Yeah.
And but you have to own it when you're creating it. That's your obligation. That's your ethical responsibility to creating content for a client
Right.
who is looking to you as the professional to get it done.
Right.
So it's 3 steps. It's not just 2 steps.
Yep.
So I thought that was important.
No, I
to
think
clarify.
that's a good little ender pin on that.
And then once they
It's-
give you the thumbs up, of like,
Yeah.
I love it.
Yep.
Now go shoot your video.
Listen, create, present.
And
do that. If you do that, however many times you have to do until everyone says yes. That's
until
it.
that client gives you the thumbs up and the green light, and they
Yep.
sign on the dotted line that gives you permission to move into pre-production
Yep.
and start actually creating your content.
Yep.
We call that the development phase at our company, and in that phase, sometimes it can take months.
Yep. And it needs to take however long it needs to take to produce the right piece of content, not your content, the right piece of content.
Sometimes it can take 5 minutes.
Yeah.
We've had a project before where a client, or where we approached a client and said, I want to shoot this commercial. What do you think? They said, that's great. We shoot it. We shot it.
Yeah.
We edited it. We sent it to them. And they
Yep.
were like, this is awesome.
Well, yeah, because the more, and this is kind of going back to the video we made before about client relationships, but if you have a really strong relationship, sometimes somebody
that
can
trust is
call
the- yeah.
you and you know their brand so well. We have a couple clients like that where we know their brand so well that they call us and they say, I'm trying to reach these people. Okay, got it.
Right.
And then it's like a home run every time.
Easy. You're done, right?
Right.
They're very happy.
But it still always starts with listening.
With listening, and that's not always the case, but there are some circumstances where you just get to have fun like that, and your ideas do get to make
Yeah.
it into the final.
Yep.
But
But you don't get there
you
without
don't-
strong listening first.
Right. You got to listen, and you got to know how to interpret
Yep.
what is being said
Yeah.
without your bias getting in the way. Well, I think this should be done or
Right.
that should be done, and
Right.
and then write it, present it back. If they don't like it, revise it. If they don't like it, revise it. If they don't like it, revise it. They like it, now you go shoot it.
Right.
Don't go a step into shooting until, because then it gets really expensive.
Yep.
Then you get into reshoots, and no one likes reshoots. So anyway,
Yeah,
That's-
I thought that was a good topic. So
that's where
thanks.
you start.
Yeah, thanks for bringing it up. And
Yep.
yeah, so to everyone out there who's asking, where should I start? Listen. That's where you should start. Learn how to be a good listener.
And then be creative.
Yes. So thanks for joining
See
us.
you later.